Sleep paralysis is a devastating condition. When I was 7, I first had sleep paralysis. My mother tucked me in that night. I could remember the citrus fragrance of her perfume. Her scent always comforted me. After she tucked me in, I quickly drifted off to sleep. The night seemed quiet, but the peaceful atmosphere in my bedroom didn't last. I woke up around midnight. A smothering sweat drenched my small body. I couldn't move my arms and legs. I could only move my eyes and my lips. It took my eyes some time to adjust to the thick darkness in my room. While my eyes were struggling to see, that's when I heard it. I could hear it snorting, a dreadful feeling coming over me when I heard the inhuman sound. I could see someone standing in my closet after my eyes adjusted. It peeked at me from behind my closet door. It stood there for a minute, snorting at me. When it lurched out of my closet, I finally saw its full body shape. Its elongated arms stretched out like tree branches. It was tall, but it had a feminine shape. It looked like a deformed 7-foot-tall naked woman. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. It felt like something paralyzed my vocal cords. After this shadowy figure stepped out of my closet, it stood in the corner of my room with its arms out. It would release a guttural snorting sound every few minutes. The sound was sickening. It reminded me of someone hawking and spitting on the ground. I could see this figure. I'm listening to the horrible noises it makes while I'm paralyzed. The moonlight came in through my bedroom window. It illuminated a part of the shadowy woman's arm. Her skin looked like mud. It didn't look burnt, just darker than dirt. All I could see was her one arm stretched out across the bedroom wall, bathed in moonlight. My mind kept trying to figure out what she was. I thought I was looking at a demon for the first time, or possibly the devil. Movements occurred, but not from me. I still couldn't move my body, no matter how hard I tried. It felt like invisible hands were holding my arms and legs down. The movement came from the shadowy woman. I watched in horror as she made a step towards the foot of my bed. She would take one step, and then she'd hesitate for a moment before taking another. Her awkward hesitation sent more chills through my body than her measured baby steps. I knew she was going to kill me if I didn't move. Frustration tortured me just as bad as my fears. I didn't know what this thing was or why it was in my bedroom. I didn't know what it wanted. The scary stories that my dad told me about the boogeyman came back to me. So I had this naked creature creeping towards me while thinking about my dad's stories and how he told me the boogeyman captures children at night and they never come back. Thanks a lot, Dad. I wanted to move so badly. I wanted to scream. It felt like I was fighting my body. The voice in my mind yelled at my body, telling it to move. The dark woman mocked me with her hesitant steps. She inched closer and closer to the foot of my bed, with her arms stretched wide open. A crazy thought went through my head. Since I couldn't move my body, I thought maybe the feeling would be numb. I assumed the creature would viciously attack me, but at least I wouldn't feel pain. I could see her long fingernails pointing out to me, and I knew those fingernails would be the first thing to dig into my body. No pain. Please, no pain. This is what I kept telling myself. Just be calm, Miranda. When the monster grabs you, you won't feel it. It won't hurt. Your body is numb, so you won't feel anything. Tears were in my eyes while I was telling myself this. I wanted my mom to save me. I wanted to see my mom's face, and I wanted to smell her perfume. I wanted to call out to my dad. My dad told me to never be afraid of anything, and that's what I tried to do. Time was running out for me. My urge to move was so strong that I started imagining that I could move my arms and legs. I thought I could move my arms, but it was just a hallucination. This was torture. Why was this happening to me? I was just a kid. I had just turned 7, and now I was going to die on the day after my birthday? I'll never go to high school, meet new friends. I'll never graduate from college. I'll never get married. I'll never find out what it's like to be a mom. The best thing I could do was close my eyes. I didn't want to see it attack me. I just buried my eyelids behind the tears. I said a prayer that my mom had taught me. My lips and my voice were still useless, so I had to say the prayer in my head. The prayer repeated in my mind. My mom and dad taught me to believe in God. I needed God to save me. My mother always told me I was God's child, and He had angels watching over me. I wanted His angel to save me that night, and I didn't see him. A demon was making its way towards my bed, and God was just going to sit there and watch it kill his child? My young mind couldn't understand what was happening. I thought the dark figure was a demon, a little girl who knew for sure she would die in her bed. More chills traveled up and down my spine when I opened my eyes to see the giant shadow woman standing over the foot of my bed. She changed her position. Before I closed my eyes, her arms were spread out as if she wanted to hug me. When I opened my eyes, she was standing motionless in front of me, her long fingers over her lips. She was telling me not to make a sound. I couldn't make a sound anyway, so when I saw her holding her fingers to her lips, it didn't matter to me. My situation turned upside down when I heard something else. Something unexpected happened. There was evil in my room, but the evil that stepped into my room was not the Shadow Woman. I remembered hearing news stories about missing children in town. My mom wouldn't let me out of her sight whenever we went to the store. There were reports of a crazed man in a clown costume going around abducting children. The police were searching for him. They couldn't find him, but they found his aftermath. They found 2 missing children dead in a wooded area. As a child, I couldn't completely comprehend the danger. When you're a kid, you want to play with your friends. I wanted to play with the other little girls in the neighborhood, but my mom would always keep me close to her side. On my birthday, I went to an amusement park, but I couldn't enjoy myself because I would go from being in my mom's arms to being in my dad's arms, constantly being carried around the park like a doll. I hated this smothering, overprotective behavior by my mother. She passed her paranoia to my father, who would normally allow freedom in my playtime. My childhood freedom ended for a little while because of a child-killing bastard. Somehow, the killer entered our home through the basement window. He stayed hidden in our house for 2 days. This is how he broke into other people's houses, and he would hack into alarm systems and shut them off. Most of the missing children's news reports involved children being taken from their homes in the dead of night without their parents even knowing what happened. A few days later, their children's naked bodies would be found in a nearby pond or in a dumpster. Mothers and fathers were losing their babies to a middle-aged, 6.5, 250-pound psychopath in a clown outfit. We didn't know that the psychopathic clown broke into our home 2 days ago. We didn't know he was hiding in the basement. I was only a child, so he thought one little girl in the house would be easy prey. He picked the wrong house that night. I heard him creeping down the hallway right outside my bedroom door. His footsteps were quiet, but clumsy. The hardwood floor in the hall would always creak. My bedroom door creaked open, and I saw his tall shadow hunched over in the doorway. I remembered hearing my pounding heart, my eyes shifting between the killer clown and the dark shadow woman. I couldn't believe I was seeing these 2 nightmarish figures standing in my bedroom. One figure was evil, while the other was good. He was wearing clown makeup, he had a red-painted nose, and he wore a pair of sunglasses over his chalky white face. I could see he had a beard, he had a pink afro wig, and he was shirtless. He had an imposing physique, like a wrestler. I also saw a massive tattoo of a wolf's face on his chest. The large butcher's knife he clutched in his right hand immediately caught my eye. Even in the darkness, I could see the knife's serrated blade gleaming. He was so big that he blocked out my doorway. I didn't know what to do. There was nothing I could do, just lay there, helpless. I started imagining that I could scream for help. My imagination was cruel, it seemed. I hated my body for not moving. I hated my voice for not letting me scream. I knew I was awake because he spoke to me. "Hi there, little princess. I'm your new friend. Your mommy went away and asked me to take care of you." When he said my mom went away, my heart sunk deep in my chest. As he got closer to my bed, I could see something dripping off the knife, and I didn't want to know what it was. When the child killer spoke to me, his voice didn't fit his body. His voice sounded androgynous. It had a deceptively feminine quality. It's terrifying to see a mountainous man in clown makeup talk softly down to you through a teenage girl's voice. I kept thinking about Pennywise from the movie It, but imagine Pennywise if he was shirtless with the body of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I closed my eyes again when I saw the killer towering over my bed, getting ready to swing down with that butcher's knife at my face. I expected to feel cold, sharp steel slice through my nose, but none of that happened. I shut my eyes, but I couldn't keep them shut for long. The child killer had so much of my attention that I'd forgotten about the shadow woman who was still standing at the foot of my bed. I remembered hearing the man scream out a curse word, and then I heard a snap. I could still make out through the darkness what was happening. I saw the killer clown's arm hanging in another direction. I'll never forget his guttural, blood-curdling scream as it pierced my ears. His scream echoed throughout our home. I thought that even the neighbors could hear him. What happened next made me almost pass out from shock. I saw the dark shadow woman lifting the child killer by the throat. She hurled him into the wall, and a penetrating thud shook my bedroom. I kept hearing the man begging for his life, and he sounded so pathetic. He just kept screaming out, "What are you? Please don't kill me, ma'am." But the dark woman had no pity for him. She bludgeoned him with his knife. I watched her break both his legs. She punched him in the chest so hard that I heard bones and chest cave in. I heard his rib cage cracking. After a few minutes, his verbal pleading became whimpering moans of agony. I didn't know that you could break bones in a human body in so many ways. After twisting the bones around in his arms and shattering the bones in his knees, I watched the dark woman raise the child killer off his feet again. She held him over her head before shoving the butcher's knife into his throat, nailing him to the wall, quite literally. I never blinked as I stared at what had happened to the killer. I almost felt sorry for the sick son of a bitch. No, not really, though. The Dark Lady made him pay for all the children he had abducted. She made him pay for his attempt to kill me. After the violence ended in my bedroom, I watched as the shadow woman moved towards my bed. She stuck out her arms again while moving towards me. It looked like she was floating in slow motion. My heart was still pounding, even when I felt her clawed fingers breezing through my hair. When she touched my face, I could smell a familiar fragrance. It was that citrus aroma from my mother's perfume. I couldn't understand why the shadow figure smelled like my mother. I didn't understand it until later. The shadow woman hovered over me. Her lips stroked my forehead. She caressed my face for a few minutes, and then she vanished when I heard my father's panicking voice coming from downstairs. I didn't want to believe that I saw blood on the killer's knife, but it was blood. It was my mother's blood. That asshole stabbed my mother to death right before he made his way upstairs towards my bedroom. He left my mother's body lying in the kitchen. My father stepped out of the house to get a few things at the store. When he came back home an hour later, he found my mom's body lying in a pool of blood. Her lavender, sleeveless nightgown was soaked in red. My father cried out when he saw her body. I heard him running up the stairs, crying out my name. When he bolted into my room, I was already in his arms before he could switch on the bedroom light. He saw the man's body nailed to the wall and lost his breath. I told him what happened and what I had seen. He couldn't believe it, but he had no choice. He knew that a little girl didn't have the strength to nail a 250-pound man to the wall. My father called the police, and when they arrived, they asked me a few questions. I told them everything. Like my father, they stared at me. A policewoman caressed my face and said, "It's okay, sweetie. You had a traumatic experience. Who you saw in your bedroom was just a good Samaritan wearing a costume." None of the police officers believed that I saw a dark shadow woman. They all believed that my trauma caused me to hallucinate. They even told me I might have seen my father killing the man, and I told them my father wasn't in the house. He had told my mother that he was going to the store. I heard him kiss my mom before he left the house. Those cops didn't believe my story. They had tons of sympathy for me, but I wanted my mother more than I wanted sympathy. I missed my mom, and I couldn't stop thinking about her fragrance. I found the perfume she wore while moving some boxes around in the attic. That sweet fragrance took me back to that night. I believe the dark figure I saw in my bedroom that night was my mother, a dead version of her. I'm 36 years old now, and I think about my mother every day. I got married to a kind and beautiful man, and we had a son. My little boy is 5 years old, and he has his mother's hazel eyes and his daddy's dimples. I try to be an excellent mother, and I'm very protective of my little one, just like my own mother was protective of me. Every night I tuck my son in bed and read him a bedtime story. One night, I told him about what had happened to his mom when she was 7 years old. He looked scared after I told him the story. My son is afraid of the dark, but I told him not to worry. I told him that his mother's love will protect him and can reach beyond death even. I told him I'd always be there to protect him. I told my baby not to be frightened if he sees a dark shadow woman standing in the corner of his bedroom. I told him She'll watch over him while he sleeps. I also told him not to panic if he wakes up suddenly, unable to move his body. Sleep paralysis is scary at first, but I told my son that his paralysis will be a sign, letting him know that the Shadow Woman is there to protect him from things that go bump in the night. There was one thing I didn't tell him, though. I didn't tell him that the black Shadow Woman standing in the corner of his bedroom might be his mommy if she dies the way her mother did. My Uncle Phil was a detective in Los Angeles. He died last week, age 75. He'd been blinded in the line of duty in 1993 and got a sweet payout. Only time I ever saw Uncle Phil get upset was when we asked the details of how he lost his sight. He refused to tell us, and even talk about it. My mom and brother and I spent the weekend clearing out his house. Uncle Phil was a nice guy overall, but he was also something of a hoarder. It took us 15 hours to get the place even close to clean. In the basement, we found his filing cabinet behind a stack of boxes labeled Men's Adventure books. The filing cabinet was locked. After my mom and brother had gone for the night, I got my buddy Reuben to come over and try to get the filing cabinet open. Reuben fashions himself as a lockpicker. Took him 16 tries. I was counting, but he finally got it unlocked. In the bottom drawer at the back was a large envelope dated 2008, marked Destroy. Guess he must have forgotten to follow through on it. Inside was a typed transcript of the very last interrogation my Uncle Phil ever did as a detective. There was also an LP, a slab of black vinyl with no sticker, no markings on it at all. I don't have a record player, but Reuben, he said he moonlights as a DJ, and he had one at his pad. So I let him take the record and rip it, send me an MP. He left, and I brought the transcripts upstairs. I read it, and it scared the crap out of me. I was in a panic afterward. I called Reuben, but he didn't answer. I tried his roommates, but they said he hadn't come home. That was 2 days ago. No one's seen Reuben, and his phone's no longer in service. This afternoon I got an anonymous email with an untitled MP3 file. I haven't opened it. I will never open it. I'm posting this transcript of my Uncle Phil's last interrogation here. I'm doing it as a warning. I know record collectors will call me paranoid, but I'm telling you, avoid unlabeled LPs you find at the thrift store or old record crates. If you're sent or somehow come across an untitled MP3, be very careful. If it says anything about the Drawn King, delete it immediately. California Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Investigating Supplement 1993-78409, Transcript 8/6/1993. PH. The coffee is just on your left. WS. Here? PH. I can help you get it if you... WS. No, I'm fine, thank you. PH. Alright, okay. It's presently 1640 at August 6, 1993. Detective Phil Hernandez, currently at the Van Nuys station at Van Nuys, California, to interview Captain Wyatt Shepard. This is for LAPD case number 1993-784. Wyatt, I want to go ahead and get down some basic information for our report. Your first name is spelled W-Y-A-T-T. Is that correct? WS. Yeah. And Shepard is spelled S-H-E-P-P-A-R-D. Right. And your occupation is firefighter. Yes, Captain. Listen, I can explain what happened. We're getting to that. First, I just need a little more background information. You told my officer at intake that this began 2 days ago after an incident. You have to understand, I tried to stop it. Wyatt, I need you to start at the beginning. I need you to take me back to the night of the fire at Burbank. You just told my officer that all this, everything that went down with Mr. Carson, it started with the fire. I want to hear why you think that. Okay, it was the apartment. That was the fire at the Oakcrest apartment on Myers, right? Right. Our engine was the first one on the scene. A 2 alarm on the second floor. Everyone had been evacuated by the time we got there. All but one person on the 3rd floor, the east corner. The manager said his name was Nash, something Nash. The man was a recluse, hadn't been out of his room in something like 20 years. Had his food, his clothes, all his stuff delivered to his door. Never stepped a foot outside, so the manager told me. You, went to Mr. Nash's door, brought him out? Wasn't that easy. Fire was spreading quick. Me and Tomlinson, Nadia Tomlinson, part of your truck company? Yes. She and I took the east stairs. It was smoky, but we still had visibility at that time. Mr. Nash didn't respond to our knocks, our shouts, so we used a battering ram, took down the door, and then stepped inside. That's when we noticed that it was weird. You mentioned weird how? The whole interior. These were regular apartments, built in the 50s or so. 1 or 2 bedrooms, most of them. Typical layout. Not this guy's place. His apartment was totally modified. All the walls were rounded out. Rounded? What do you mean? He'd smoothed them all down to remove the corners. There were no corners in the place. No windows either. It was like being inside a big egg. He had painted them white, too. Wasn't done professionally, if you know what I mean. It was clear that the work was of one person over years and years, just filling in the corners, smoothing them out. And the furniture was like that as well. Yes, all the chairs were beanbags. The tables were sliced tree trunks. It was crazy, but we weren't in there to examine the decor. We were in there to get Mr. Nash out. But he wasn't going to come easy. He was guarding this wall full of records. Like the records you smashed at the station. The records I smashed and scattered across the field behind the station. Yeah, we found the pieces. But you didn't put them back together, right? You couldn't do that. No, we haven't put the pieces together. You need to burn them, to melt them. Wyatt, we've gotten off track. Tell me about the apartment. Nash had tons of those records, easily 1,000, all stacked up, and he was holding one of them, sitting on his futon mattress and yelling this crazy stuff about how he couldn't leave, how if he left the apartment, he'd die. You gotta understand, the building was heating up. Smoke was filling the hallways. We had to get out, so we went to grab him, and that's when he pulled the revolver. He put it to his head, said he'd rather lose control over his own death. As me and Tomlinson were getting close, trying to calm him down, he pulled the trigger, and it didn't fire. It was an old firearm. I didn't get a good look at it. Maybe it was busted. Anyway, I was able to smack the gun out of his hand, and we got him up and out. That's when you lost him. I didn't. We didn't lose him. We got out into the hallway, and he was carrying on, acting crazy. The smoke was so bad. We had respirators on, put one on him too. Had the added benefit of keeping him quiet. We moved fast down the hall, towards the stairs, but the flames were coming up, right up behind the floor, so we had to stop. This is right outside the apartment, 312. Yeah, somewhere near there, I guess. I wasn't looking. Okay, go on. So I have Mr. Nash back in the corner, right behind me. Tomlinson is radioing down, trying to get help, trying to help the guided crews. They've got the hoses hitting that part of the building, putting down those fires long enough for us to get back. Maybe it's been 2 minutes? Probably less. Nash is right behind me, holding one of those records and mumbling all scared. He's terrified and pulling on my coat. I turn and look at him, tell him it's only been a few seconds. That's when he shouts something freaky. He says, "He's here." I asked Nash who he was talking about, because I was worried, you know? Did we miss somebody? But at the same time, I had to turn back to Tomlinson, because she was giving the signal that we can move forward.
that's when I hear it.
You said it was a whistle.
Yeah, it was like a little lullaby. Just a few notes, sing-songy, the way you do to a baby.
Someone else in the apartment building?
No, it sounded further away than that. Like from outside, like above the apartment building. But that's just what I heard, a whistling, a tune. The thing is, fires are loud. That's what most people don't think about when they sound like tornadoes. Just this blasting industrial sound. But I could hear that whistle over the flames. It was crystal clear.
And it was just the once?
Yes, just the once. And this guy Nash, he screams like he's being murdered. The worst scream I've ever heard. He's behind me still, right? I haven't turned around or anything, but I've heard people screaming before, in fires, several times. Horrible sounds. It'll haunt you. When I tell you that, they say, oh, you must hate going to amusement parks. But that's not it.
People screaming on roller coasters or...
Right, but that's not the same sound. What I'm talking about is, actually, it's playgrounds. I can't go to regular parks. For me, it's hearing children scream, even if it's because they're playing, having fun. The pitch is high and piercing, and that's what someone dying in a fire sounds like. Broken glass, screaming as the superheated air hits the lining of the throat. Anyway, this was worse than that. To be honest, it sounded like Nash was being turned inside out. So of course I reacted. I spun around to him and he's gone. He's just gone. And the record he was holding is lying there next to a little pool of blood. That's it. Poof.
And Mr. Nash couldn't have just snuck past you.
How? I had him in a corner. My back pressed up against him. I would have felt him push past. Would have seen him going down the hall. No. He was just gone. Vanished.
All right. You couldn't find him. You get back outside.
We looked. We looked everywhere, but the fire was growing and the other engine hadn't showed up yet. So we had to leave the building. I took the record and we exited. The next 3 hours we fought the fire. Didn't put it out until nearly 2 in the morning.
The record was supposed to be handed to the officer on the scene.
I know, but in the chaos, it ended up with us. In the engine and then back to the station. As soon as I noticed it, I called Stefan.
Officer DeNovo.
Yes, he's a friend. We belong to the same gym. We know a couple of the same people. So when I saw I had the record, I called him. He said I should hang on to it, and he'd swing by the station to grab it the next day. It wasn't like we considered the thing evidence, or right then it was just Nash that was missing.
That record have a sleeve or a jacket or whatever?
No, it was just a disc. Corners, right? A sleeve would have had corners.
Your truck company consisted of 5 firefighters. You, Captain, Nadia Tomlinson, Lieutenant, Dave Carlson, driver, Jalen Ordelia, and Grace Zhang, firefighters.
Yes,
and they all saw the record.
We looked it over together.
Was there anything written on it, or?
Yes, the label. It was printed. Like this thing was pressed and legit. I don't know much about vinyl, but it didn't look homemade or anything.
And what did the label say?
It had some numbers, and then just this one phrase. Not like a song list or a band name or anything, just this one phrase printed on it. It said, "Play me, and I'll come to you."
And did you?
Yes, but we did. We put it on the turntable in the break room, and all of us sat around and listened to it for a few minutes. First 15 seconds were just tones, like electronic noises. And then there was, I don't know, like a field recording, like someone was outside with a microphone. There was wind and chimes and maybe trees rustling. Then footsteps, crunching on rocks and pebbles. Then a voice came on. It was Nash.
You saying he made the record?
It was his voice for sure. but like a lot younger. I'm guessing it was recorded 20 years ago at least, maybe even longer. What was he saying? It's like a spell, near as I can describe it. It's him speaking English and chanting stuff. I can't recall all the words, but the phrases were a bunch of craziness. The weirdest one was like, "Cyst with twins inside, the edge of light, and praise the blood-ridden splinters in the hands of the sepulchral seers." All of it garbage, right? I thought so at the time. I really thought so, but at the end of the record, it was just 10 minutes long of chanting. Nash says, "I conjure you, you are sown, you are here, you are grown, the drawn king, come to me." The Drawn King. Right, that was the name, what he called it. The talking stopped there. Then we're all sitting in the rec room, right? We've all just come from this fire and we're cooling down and getting some much needed downtime, but that record, all of us, we were on edge. I looked around the room and even Jalen, the coolest guy, he was looking anxious as all hell. Grace wanted to just shut it off right then and there, but we didn't. That's the thing I most regret. We didn't. So what happened? The record kept going, those sounds of wind and chimes and rustling of trees, and then the whistling. It drifted in, soft at first, and then louder and closer. It was the same whistling that I heard at the Oakcrest apartment. Same exact one. I got chills. My whole body just felt electric in the worst way. Like that inbuilt threat system we have. The primal one. It was going crazy, warning me. Warning you about what? That bad stuff was going on. The whistling drifted away again. And then Nash came into the microphone and I'm just recalling it from memory, okay? He said, "I've done the conjuring. You heard it with me. Now you are tuned. Tuned today. Tuned 10 years from now." That was the word. Tuned. Then he said, "And if you want the Drawn King to come to you, look in the nearest corner and let him in. He's always watching you from the corners, always waiting to come through. Stare back at him. Stare into the corner. Then count to 6 very slowly, saying his name each time. Do not blink. Do not turn away. You will hear the whistle, and that means he's approaching. From then on, when you see him, he will come to you, and he will set you free." That's what Nash said. That's when the recording ended. Him being the Drawn King. Does that mean anything to you? No, never heard of it. Of him. And this whole thing about corners, you're talking regular corners, like the walls here. Yes, any corner, any 3 edges meeting. I suppose it could be as small as the corner of a cereal box, or as big as the corner of a building. I never really thought of corners as being particularly scary. That's because corners aren't a thing you usually think about, right? Like on a daily basis or anything. But if you do think about them, if you really focus on the idea, you'll feel this tremor in your gut, and you'll realize that corners, they're something you've always been uneasy looking at. That's why Nash's place was the way it was. See, that's what I realized. His apartment, Nash got rid of the corners in his place, because he conjured the Drawn King, and he wasn't safe. Like the record said, you can call him, you can see him, and he comes to you. Maybe Nash thought it was a good idea at first, you know. People who are into magic, they always use it to try and summon spirits and things, whatever, to become rich or find love or get power. But this thing, the Drawn King, I'm guessing Nash wasn't prepared. You told Officer Rollins that you think Mr. Nash was taken by this, Drawn King. Yes, and you also said that he, or it, took Dave Carson. Yes, Dave disappeared, same way as Nash. Well, most of him disappeared. Officers recovered Dave's lungs and larynx at your fire station. You have to understand, I'm trying to, Wyatt. To be frank, it sounds crazy. I know that, but you don't see what I've seen. Explain it to me then. What exactly happened to Mr. Carson? After we listened to the record, everyone got upset, creeped out. Tomlinson, Jalen, Grace, they went upstairs to bed to tune out. Me and Dave, we went to the kitchen. Late night snack. Dave used to whip up these meatball sandwiches that, Anyway, he was one of those tough city kids, kicked out of his house when he was in high school. Minor miracle that he made it to 21. Even bigger miracle that he got into the academy. Dave and I had our run-ins, a few tussles, but he was a good firefighter. Laser focused when he was on the job, and a total clown when he wasn't. That clown side, the Joker, that's why he decided to try it out. To prove that it was all crap. That the apartment, the record, the Drawn King, they were all just products of Nash's sick mind. Okay, so what happened? Well, Dave and I, we tried it. Tried what? Well, like I said, we were in the kitchen, at the table. Dave turned his chair around and pointed to the corner. It was across the room. I think we kept some gear there at one time, but it was empty. Only dust and shadows. So he stares at it, stares at the corner, starts to count. With each number, he says the name, the Drawn King. We're laughing at first, but we can't both help but feel the pressure. I don't know how to explain it, like when a storm is approaching, and you can feel the heaviness come down, fill the air with electricity. Soon we were both counting, slow and saying his name, and our eyes are locked on the corner. We couldn't look away. So we get to 6, and that's when we hear it. The whistle. Like at the apartment fire. Yeah, just the same. Just as haunting as on the record. A lullaby. Just a few notes. And this was coming from outside. It was distant, like on the edge of hearing, but it wasn't outside. It sounded exactly like it was coming from behind the corner, like right inside of it. And you went and looked? I jumped up with my flashlight and walked over, keeping the beam on the corner. There was nothing there, just dust. Me and Dave were both shaken, though. Had that rubber-legged feeling you get when you step off a roller coaster. Adrenaline pumping through us. We went upstairs and we came up with all sorts of ways to dismiss what had happened. And the rest of your company, they were asleep. None of them heard that whistle? No. All right, go on. I was in the bathroom washing my face when I heard it again. The whistle. Only it was real close this time. Too close, like right there in the room with me. So I look up into the mirror and I see the corner of the bathroom behind me, and I see him. I swear to God, I see him coming out of the corner, staring right at me. Who was staring at you, Wyatt? The Drawn King. I just knew it was him. This was a person? Maybe once, but something horrible had happened. He was on the floor, crouched down like an animal, peeking out from the corner at me. His face was all twisted. Twisted? Twisted how? A couple years ago, we were called to a food processing plant. Guy there, he fell into one of those industrial mixers, the kind with the massive stainless steel whisks. It pulled him like taffy. Taffy with bones in it, and that's what the Drawn King looked like. Only he was moving, alive, staring at me. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, he was gone. That's when I heard something downstairs. And Dave Carson, was he upstairs with you still, or? He was in the bay, holding an axe and a flashlight, looking under the engines, all panicked and sweating. Dave nearly cut me in half when I came up on him. I'd said his name aloud, but he was too far gone. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me someone was after him, someone all bent and warped out of shape. I knew he'd caught a glimpse of him too. We searched the garage every inch, but We didn't find anything. Did you rouse the others or... No. We were feeling foolish. Neither of us wanted to admit that we were seeing things, and the same things at that. I figured we were just exhausted, stressed out. We talked about it maybe being PTSD from the encounter with Nash, but Dave hadn't been inside the apartment. So we turned on all the lights in the kitchen and just sat there. Tried to stay calm. We had some tea. Dave said he thought it could be something he'd read about in a book when we were taking classes at the community college. Something called folie à deux. That's a mental condition, correct? Yes, it's where two people share the same psychotic delusion. Like seeing something following you. Something coming out from the corner. I mean, I'd never heard of it before, but it made sense. We both had listened to the record, stared at the corner, counted and said the name. We heard the whistle. Maybe we both had a mental break at the same time, you know? Stranger things have happened, right? Anyway, that kind of calmed me down. Calmed us both down. Alright. There was no way we were going back to sleep. Dawn was close. Lights were all on. And after a couple hours of quiet, of not seeing anything, we kind of felt stupid. Like kids who scare themselves telling ghost stories or trying to freak each other out. Nash, the record, it had all gotten under our skin. Dave wanted to smoke. He'd do it in the parking lot out back. This time, though, we kept the door open, just in case. I don't know if it was so we could keep an eye on each other, or for me to keep tabs on him. Again, our nerves had gotten fried. Our minds were getting the best of us. So Dave goes over to the door, pushes it open, and steps out. But he keeps his foot there, so, I can see him. It's dark out there, but there's a light in the lot, so it's not like... Anyway, he lights up a smoke, takes a couple drags, kind of laughs. I remember that. Then we hear it again. The whistle. Only this time, it's okay. Take a break. What'd you hear? The whistle. It wasn't like before. It wasn't off in the distance or above us or outside in the corner. It was loud, like thunder, enough to make us want to cover our ears, like an air raid siren, and Dave turned to look at me, and we both knew. My God, in that split second we both knew, and I don't know how to describe it, but it was like our souls just shattered. He knew it was the end. His eyes locked onto me, and take your time. He screamed. Dave screamed the same as Nash, the same as someone being burned alive. As he screamed, his eyes just boring holes into mine, his pain and fear, and he turned to look outside at the corner of the station, and as the Drawn King grabbed him, he dragged Dave inside on his belly. Dave's nails grinded desperately against the asphalt. The door slammed shut. You saw this. Yes, I saw the Drawn King's arm, his hands. Those fingers were too long, too sharp. He had Dave by the back, and there was blood spraying everywhere. And I ran out there after him, yelling his name, and I kicked open the door, and there was his cigarette, still lit, still smoking, and there was a big puddle of thick blood and body parts, pieces. No sign of the rest of Dave Carson. No sign. I swear to God, he was gone, and this Drawn King took him. I know how it sounds, okay? I do. But you didn't wake the others or call the cops, right? You did something else. Yes, I went back inside, into the kitchen. The record that Nash had made, it was sitting there on the counter, and I smashed it. Then as the sun was coming up, I threw the pieces into the field. That's when I realized that Nash, he'd defeated the Drawn King by rounding off all the corners in his apartment, right? It kept him safe for decades. I couldn't do that. How was I going to do that? So I realized there was another way. You cut your eyes out. With a potato peeler. I suppose a knife or a pin would have been easier. Why did you do that, Wyatt? It was the thing I remembered Nash saying on the record. I guess maybe he didn't think of it, or he didn't have the guts to go through with it. Me, I didn't want to be trapped like a zoo animal the way he was, so I figured I'd do the other thing. If I can't see the Drawn King, then he can't come to me. I'm pretty sure my 5-year-old nephew thinks the same way. Obviously it worked. I'm here, aren't I? Yeah, you're here. It's a good thing those records burned, that I smashed up the very last one. Dave Carson's dead, Wyatt. Torn to pieces, basically, and you're the last person seen him. I should remind you that according to your company, Nadia Tomlinson, Grace Zhang, when they came downstairs at the fire station, they found quite a scene. Your eyeballs on the kitchen counter, Dave Carson missing, big puddle of blood, you babbling about things coming out of the corners. That's a bad look. Miss Tomlinson, she says you were acting strange after the fire, after listening to the record, and as you said, you and Dave had run-ins before. I didn't kill him. Your fingerprints were on Dave Tomlinson's windpipe. His blood was also all over your hands. I told you that's how I found him. You're going to be charged with Mr. Carson's murder, Wyatt. Well, I won't be convicted. I didn't do it. I'll prove it in court. We got a lot of evidence to the contrary. And besides, I've heard the record. What? Sit down. Now listen to me. In the basement of the Oakcrest apartment, there's a storage room that survived the fire and the water. We did a thorough investigation and found 2 boxes of Nash's records. I listened to one of them last night. Your description is very accurate. In fact, I got the record here on the table in front of you. So you know. It's just a creepy novelty record is all. A joke. The contents of the box, the other records, we dropped them off at a donation center. Please! I don't want this to... Do what, Wyatt? Confess to killing Mr. Carlson? No. Wyatt, you're kidding me, right? You think that if I look at the corner right now, if I, count to 6 and say the Drawn King over and over again, that he'll appear like Mephistopheles? Please, I'm begging you. You heard the record. I'm gonna prove to you that the Drawn King don't exist, that you've been tainted by that record, by your own mental illness, your deep-seated hatred for Mr. Carson. Don't. For the record, no pun intended, I'm turning on the record to my left, on the floor. It's empty, maybe a dust bunny or 2. Certainly nothing scary or twisted there. And I'm staring at the corner. Here we go. 1, the Drawn King. 2, the Drawn King. 3, Don't do this, detective, please! 3, the Drawn King. 4, the Drawn King. 5, the Drawn King. I'm begging you! 6, the Drawn King. And now, how long, Wyatt? No. I don't hear nothing. No whistle, no creepy noises at all. And I'm looking and... Nope, there's no person hiding in the corner. Guess I was right about the dust bunnies. Note, an audible whistle is heard on the tape recorder. It is of medium volume, melodic. Oh, God. Don't mess with me, Wyatt. You heard it. You heard it. He's coming. I'll be back in a few minutes. You stay seated and... Jesus! What is... You see him. I know you see him. What is... No. Use your pen. Use your pen. There's a garbled scream, believed to be from Detective Hernandez. Tape cuts out then. I know what you must be thinking. What a horrible person. I know. I've thought it too. The fact I'm genuinely thinking about sending away my dog makes me feel pretty guilty. Then I remember what he's been doing, and my guilt is replaced with fear. This started about a month ago. I came home early from work one day, absolutely furious, and clutching a parting gift from my boss. My Christmas bonus was a ham or something. I sighed with a hand pressed firmly against my throbbing temple and placed the mystery meat in the fridge. The pounding behind my eyes got more and more intense, until I leveled my fist and punched the fridge. The throbbing in my head didn't go away, but there was a new guest, as it was now accompanied by the pain in my knuckles. I let out a deep sigh that was childish. It was at that moment that Rufus came padding in, his big brown eyes gazing up at me, as if wondering what that noise had been. "Your dad was pretty dumb just now," I said, crouching down to run my hands across his thick fur. He wagged his tail and let out an excited noise as I petted him. I raised my eyebrows. "I wish I could just curl up in a ball and chill like you do." Rufus, of course, paid no mind to this, and after realizing he wouldn't be receiving more pets, padded away back to his comfortable bed. I rolled my eyes and took a deep breath. While disappointing, this whole Christmas bonus thing wasn't the end of the world. Sure, my boss was an evil prick, but I had a whole 2 weeks of paid vacation stored up, and he couldn't stop me from using it. So, screw him. I'm gonna relax and spend my vacation doing whatever I want. "How about it, Rufus? Want to do nothing?" I asked loudly. Rufus simply yawned. It was the next morning that I discovered that the mystery meat was still in my fridge. I peeled back the wrapped paper to see a red mass bundled in saran wrap. I furrowed my brow. Gotta be beef. Rufus sat at my side, eagerly waiting. I'm not a butcher. How would I know what it is? I'll just fry it? Everything tastes good fried with onions. I leaned down and booped Rufus's snoot. I bet you would taste good fried with onions, too. He agreed as his tail wagged back and forth. Well, don't you have a high opinion of yourself? I cut off a large chunk of the mystery meat and threw it in a pan with onions, salt, pepper, and butter. I hope you taste good, Christmas bonus, because you don't really look that great. I probably talk to myself too much. Having a full conversation probably isn't healthy. I raised my eyebrow and decided to turn on the TV for my own sanity. It blinked on to a cooking channel. I glared at the TV. Don't you shame me. Then I flipped to the news and got right back to frying the beef. Thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and families of the late... I looked down at the large mass of beef left over. Hey, Rufus, I picked up a raw slab. Want something to chew on? He dashed on over like any dog would when presented with a hunk of meat. All right, you want it? Sit, I commanded with my most authoritative voice. Rufus gave no care, lunging upward and snagging it from my hand. Hey, I said, laughing, that was rude. Rufus took one last look at me before tearing into the beef with vigor. Still chuckling to myself, I once again turned back to the news. The search is still on for Maya Kelling, a local who was reported missing on December 14th by her boyfriend. She was in the Beluva area, and anyone with information is encouraged to call this number. I shut it off. The news is so depressing. Rufus paid me no mind, as he continued munching away with that playful ferocity of a domesticated animal. I took a deep breath and went to have a smell of the beef. It smelled god-awful. Jesus, what did I do to this thing? There was something deeply off-putting about that smell. It didn't smell rotten or decayed. It smelled foreign. It filled me with apprehension and a strange sense of dread. I shook my head and felt a wave of stupidity roll over me. The feeling was not too dissimilar when you were watching a scary YouTube video at night by yourself and you want to turn the lights on. I felt like a little bitch, but the feeling of nervousness and the fact that no one but me would judge me for throwing all this meat out made my decision easy. This was going straight into the garbage. I threw it in and did my utmost to forget about it. Take out it is. Having stuffed myself with pizza, I crashed hard. I'm a heavy sleeper, so it takes a lot to wake me up. Yet, I was woken up. A loud crash echoed through my bedroom as I shot bolt upright and listened for a moment. I heard dragging noises. My heart pounded in my chest. I stood, having armed myself with my pistol, I took a couple of careful steps forward. The noise became more distinguished. There was a gnawing and an eager snort. A sense of dread filled me as I rounded the corner, expecting the worst. "Rufus!" I shouted, seeing an absolutely devastating mess. He had torn open the trash, and it was scattered everywhere. I groaned and slumped my shoulders. "Not only did you scare the crap out of me, I'm also gonna have to clean up your friggin' mess. Come on, man." Rufus had pillaged what he was looking for and scampered off without even looking at me. Having fully cleaned up the mess, I stood up and stretched, cracking my back in a few places. "You're an ass for that," I said as I washed my hands. "I'm going back to bed. Good night. Love you," I trailed off. Rufus was sitting on his bed, gnawing on something. "Hey, what do you have there?" I walked forward and reached down. To my great surprise, it was the first time I was greeted by a low growl. "Hey now," I said, my words barely making it out of my throat because of the immediate surprise and fear. I took a few steps back and knelt down to get a good view of what he was gnawing on. The mystery meat. I reached forward tentatively and got met with the same low growl as before. "Rufus, come on, give me that. I think it's bad." But what Rufus did next sent a chill down my spine. He simply stopped gnawing on it and stared me dead in my eyes. No more movement, no tail wagging, nothing. I must have sat there for 30 seconds before I did anything. I stood up, forcing myself to turn around despite every single fiber of my being telling me not to take my eyes off of him. "Fine, have it your way." I couldn't help but take a peek over my shoulder as I walked away. He sat motionless, his eyes still locked onto mine. I turned on my light and closed my door, lying in bed until my eyes got too heavy to keep open. After waking up, it took a few seconds to recollect the night before. When I did, I fully opened my door to reveal Rufus curled up in a ball. He was curled up in his dog bed, fast asleep. I felt the weary tension within me wither away. "I need to get out of the house," I muttered. I came home that night to a dark abode. Having been drinking, my bearings were slightly askew, and I found myself fumbling with my keys a bit. As I pushed open the door to my house, I was greeted by an unfriendly darkness that settled itself over an empty house. I pawed for the light switch for a moment, until I found it, flipping it on with my one hand. "Crap!" I cried in fear, as my gaze was met by a great black mass standing in the middle of the living room. It wobbled slightly, as if unsure of its footing, before it fell to all fours. "Rufus?" I cried, my heart playing in my ribcage like a bongo. What the hell were you doing, you creepy-ass mutt?" Rufus just stared, tail stationary, eyes fixated on me. I'm gonna go relax." "Cut that out." Rufus didn't blink. Neither did I. I slammed my door closed and sat on the edge of my bed, taken aback. Jesus, that was friggin' scary. As I took off my shoes, the image of the shadows in the dark, form stretched in a way it wasn't supposed to, made my skin crawl. I've seen dogs standing up before, but in that goofy cute way. Hell, I've even seen dogs do a headstand. But this, standing in the middle of the room in the dark, just staring at the door, it unsettled me to my core. My sleep was troubled, as if I had a nightmare I couldn't quite remember. I woke up to that feeling of unease creeping its way back up my spine. To stall, I scrolled through the news, but nothing could take my mind off of it. Not Bitcoin plunging in value, not the disappearance of that local girl, not Taco Bell bringing back the nacho fries. I just kept imagining what Rufus must be doing at any given moment. Standing there. Just standing there. I growled and punched my pillow. I'm acting like a wuss. Gotta get up. I rolled out of bed and crept to my door, heart pounding. I stared at the handle and reached my hand out slowly. my heart beginning to thump against my chest at an increased tempo, with a deep breath that caught in my chest as I eased the door open. I felt fear jolt through my body as I saw him, standing once again in the middle of the living room, his furry back to me, as he stood absolutely motionless, staring at the wall. My words caught in my throat before I could speak. I did the worst possible thing I could have possibly done, and quietly closed the bedroom door. The fear began to set in worse. I locked my door and collapsed on my bed, breathing fast. He was out there, standing upright. I couldn't open that door again. I couldn't make it out of the house. Not with him there. Not with him just standing there. I found myself nauseous with terror that had possessed my body. I sat there staring at the door for the better part of an hour, before finally getting up the courage to once again check outside. I crept closer, each footfall on the soft carpet surely giving me away to the keen ears of Rufus. My heart pounded in near apoplectic terror as I once again laid my hands on the knob. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to open the door. Once it did, I peered through the crack to try and see where he might be. Still standing. Trying my best to summon fury, I opened the door wide and shouted, "Rufus!" All the anger I summoned was turned into terror vapors when Rufus slowly turned his head to face me. He turned his body next. He took a step. He took another one, and another. I screamed in horror as he began marching towards me, off kilter, one step at a time. I once more slammed the door and locked it, stumbling backwards in panic. I didn't hear a sound at my door, but I saw the shadow of something standing there. "Rufus, stop it right now!" It was met with silence again. I was met with a terrible sound. It sounded like when a dog yawns and their voice stretches and bends. But this had purpose. This wasn't just a noise. It was measured, meaningful. "Get out of my house!" I screamed in terror as it continued. "Get out now!" The sound stopped. The shadow at my door was slowly and clumsily plodding away. I shook, my breath coming in gasps. I stayed awake in my room for the rest of the day, until finally thirst gripped me and I couldn't bear it any longer. I left the room, armed with the small pistol I keep for safety. There he was, curled up in his dog bed, fast asleep. I kept my eyes locked on him as I tiptoed around, gathering food and water before dashing to my room. I type this now to you, asking the community of people who deal with these things. If I call the cops, they'll call animal control. They'll either laugh in my face or simply take Rufus. I don't want that. I want my Rufus back, my good boy. What's happening to him? Why is he like this? Afternoon was progressing into evening at the apartment complex when a knock came at my door. That's odd. I wasn't expecting anyone. Pressing my face against the door, I peered outside through the peephole. There was absolutely nobody out there. Nothing but the wind blowing a small piece of trash on the sidewalk. Telling myself that maybe I was just hearing things did me little good. I knew what I heard. Maybe it was just one of the neighbors doing something that caused a bang on the other side of the wall, and I mistook it for a knock on the door. Yeah, maybe, I thought. But deep down, I knew that didn't feel right. In any case, nobody was there, so I sat back down on the couch and unpaused the episode of the show I was watching. Ever since the pandemic lockdown shut everything a couple of years ago, my entire lifestyle had changed drastically. I stayed indoors at first out of necessity, but then as the restrictions began to ease and things started to open up and resemble something akin to normalcy. I stayed indoors out of habit. My life was binge watching and streaming whatever shows were being pumped out, like slop into a pig trough. After some time had passed, the sun was falling closer towards the horizon outside when another knock came at my door. I heard it this time. I know I did. Unmistakable. A knock at my door. Plain as day. I jumped up and rushed across the room to peep out the little peephole on my door. There was somebody there this time. It was a pizza delivery guy, toting one of those insulated bags they used to keep the pies hot and fresh. I recognized the chain on his hat as being from one of the local ones. I'd eaten there often. Well, not there. That would imply that I ever leave my apartment. I don't leave the apartment. I meant I had eaten from there, ordering delivery that was probably more often than I feel comfortable admitting. Despite that fact, I hadn't ordered any pizza. Not today. "You got the wrong place, bud," I yelled through the door, still watching him through the peephole. He looked confused, like he either couldn't understand me or hadn't heard what I'd said. My hands went for the doorknob on instinct, but I caught it at the last second. Something wasn't right. I ordered from this place pretty often, but I'd never seen this guy. It was always the same 3 people that delivered, and he wasn't one of them. He looked plain enough, maybe too plain, too generic. "I didn't order a pizza! Go away!" I yelled slowly, enunciating every syllable so my words couldn't be misunderstood. It seemed that he heard me that time, looking down at the receipt taped to the side of the bag. Realization crossed his face as he realized he had the wrong apartment. Everything about it, from the realization to the pantomime of him smacking the side of his head to emphasize it, seemed forced. As soon as he walked away and out of sight, I slowly turned the deadbolt on my door and locked it. I just had a bad feeling. That feeling told me not to trust that guy. As I went back to my couch and unpaused my show, I couldn't shake that funny feeling. I tried to recall what exactly it was about that guy that seemed so shady. Yeah, that's the word. Shady. I had to go back a few minutes on my show because whenever I got out of my thoughts and started paying attention to what was happening on TV, I realized I'd missed some plot points. Important plot points. The sun outside was coloring the horizon with brilliant colors and hues when yet another knock came on my door. Slightly irritated, because the episode was just getting good, and I was interrupted yet again, I paused it and went to the door. I looked through the peephole and saw that this time it was a couple of little girls. Their tan uniforms and bright red scarves with the numerous little badges dotted on them told me they were Girl Scouts. One of them had a little wagon in tow, overflowing with boxes of cookies, no doubt. As I stood there, debating on whether or not to answer, that familiar fear came creeping up my spine again. During this whole pandemic thing, I'll admit that I may have developed some new phobias. They came natural given the situation, and joined the club of my already existing and ever-growing phobias and fears. Coronaphobia, it's been termed, and it quickly became one of my biggest new fears. It's not just the fear of contracting the virus, but everything associated with it. Public places, social situations, objects, and the biggest of them all, contact with people. Like a germaphobe licking a doorknob, that chill running down my spine sent shivers throughout my nervous system as I shuddered. I physically jumped when the little girl knocked again. I had made up my mind right then and there. I'd just stay quiet, and they'd go away. They'll move on if I just leave it be. I looked through the peephole again to see them backing up their little red wagon and walking away, watching them like a hawk. As I was scanning them and noticing how generic they looked, the one pulling the wagon said, "You can't stay in there forever," as they disappeared around the corner and out of sight. What the hell did that mean? Why did they say that? Were they referring to me? I tried to brush it off. They were just kids after all. Or were they? All day long, strangers had been knocking, every single one of them trying to get me to open my door. Why? What was their plan? They all looked so shady or generic, like if you had an AI produce an image of a pizza guy or a couple of Girl Scouts. Nothing about them stood out at all, and yet because of that, everything about them stood out. Stock images, knocking at my door. I tried to calm down, and a cup of coffee helped. There was no conspiracy, and if there was, what was it? No. Every instance had a perfectly good explanation. The first knock, probably just some kid playing ding-dong ditch. The second, it was a new delivery guy that had misread the apartment number on the ticket. The third one, innocent little Girl Scouts selling cookies to raise money for some annual trip or something. All obviously perfectly good examples. I've got to stop reading so much into these mundane occurrences. I mean, that's what my psychologist says, that I have a tendency to run with my delusions, whatever that means. Now that I think about it, though, Dr. Johnson looks pretty generic too, and that name, Johnson, most generic of all names. I don't think I'll be contacting him on Zoom anymore. Those pills he prescribed me didn't even work. I mean, they kind of worked, but only because they made me feel so sluggish and sleepy. It's hard to be delusional when you feel like a zombie all day. Sunlight was fading and dusk was fast approaching when a knock came at my door. I lifted the remote to pause the show, but it was already paused. Had I forgot to hit the play button after those little girls wearing the scout uniforms tried to trick me into opening the door? This time, with my eyeball glued to the peephole, I saw a young man wearing a nice white shirt, fancy black slacks, and a bicycle helmet standing serendipitously at my front door. There was a bike parked on the sidewalk behind him. The smile on his face was polite and non-threatening. That was the only reason why I didn't yell at him to go away from the start. That and because he didn't look so generic. He had too many freckles and acne that kind of made him stand out. "Yeah?" I asked loud enough through the door. "Hello, sir. I was wondering if I could have a moment of your time," he asked, respect and politeness oozing from his voice. "What do you want?" I yelled, after taking a moment to build up my courage. "What do you people want?" What I hoped would be a rhetorical and needless question, not necessarily at the young man, but at the outside world in general, at whatever had been outside trying to lure me out. The young man's smile faded for an instant, as if he had experienced something akin to my reaction countless times before. As quickly as it faded, though, it reappeared and was reinforced. "I want what any decent and God-loving person wants, sir. I want to do my part to save as many souls as possible. I promise, sir, just a quick moment of your time." I wanted to trust the kid from the moment I saw him. He wasn't generic. He didn't look generic, like the others. What if he was telling the truth, and there really was something out there? What if something that wanted to lure me outside and take my soul was lurking somewhere out there, and he wanted to save people from it, wanted to save me from it? He didn't look generic, not like the others. I was torn. What if some shred of logic fought with the rest of my paranoid, fear-addled brain? "I won't come outside. You'll have to come inside to me. But if I let you inside, you have to promise me you're not generic, and that you'll tell me everything you know about this thing. Can you do that for me?" I shouted. The young man agreed with a curt, "Yes, sir." Before I unlatched the door, I quickly ran into the kitchen and grabbed a large butcher's knife, the biggest one I had. Concealing it behind my back, I unlocked the door with a shaky hand and slowly, in small degrees, opened the door. I winced as the fading light of dusk illuminated my cave-like apartment. I was expecting, I don't know, something. I was ready for anything as soon as I opened that door, but when no boogeyman came rushing towards me, I knew I'd made the right decision in trusting this kid. He really was trying to help me, and those generic things out there knew it. Maybe they were afraid of him. Yeah, they had to be. If that was the truth, that meant that he had the answers. Answers that I needed if I was going to avoid, or God forbid, fight off whatever was trying to trick me into coming outside. I motioned for the young man to quickly step inside, peering around the corner and into the outside world for something generic waiting to pounce. As soon as he was inside, I quickly shut the door behind him and hastily engaged the deadbolt. Okay, I think we're safe. Now tell me, what do you know about it? I asked, trying to remain calm and on the brink of failing. Well, sir, we believe in very similar things. Things that most people believe, but there are some things that we feel that they have got wrong. He had my full attention, and I loosed my white-knuckle grip on the knife behind my back. Yeah? Go on. Well, sir, most others believe that he is the Trinity. Our belief diverges there slightly. We believe that he is the one, and that dividing his being into three is just wrong, that it takes away from his grandeur, the young man said, matter-of-factly. Are you sure about that, kiddo? So far I've counted 3 of them out there. Was it possible that this kid didn't know as much about the situation as I thought he did? How sure are you about this? Are you willing to gamble your life on it? We don't believe in gambling, sir, but yes, I trust my eternal soul on this information. He sounded so sure. I thought it might be cocky of him, but cocky was good. That means he had confidence. Confidence is something that you want in someone who wants to save your soul. Also, sir, I know that most people believe that he was resurrected. We differ in that belief. While we can agree that he died for our sins, we believe that the resurrection was more spiritual in nature. What kind of creatures are we dealing with out there? I thought, if this man was to be believed, then it could shapeshift. There weren't 3 of them like I'd counted, but a single entity. Plus, it not only fed on souls, but was dying to get at our sins, whatever the hell that meant. I mean, of course it wanted our souls, the thing that died and lost its own, only to be resurrected as a soulless, generic husk. No, this was worse than I thought. Well, this was terrible news. It felt good to have my paranoia validated for once. So, how do we beat this generic devil? I asked, staring intently into his eyes. By God, this kid was cocky. For me to ask a question like that, and his reaction to be a smile. He was the real deal. With prayer, sir. All things are possible through prayer, was his answer. So caught up I had been, mulling over this revelation. My grip on the knife behind my back must have momentarily eased. As the knife slipped between my fingers, it fell and stuck into my wooden floor. The young man saw this. As his eyes glared at the erect blade protruding upward from the floor, that smile that had beamed at me turned into a mouth agape. He stared at it, then at me, then at the knife again. His previously friendly eyes were now wide with terror. I glanced down at the knife, giving it a dismissive wave of my hand. Don't worry about that. I need you to teach me the prayer. We gotta kill this thing for good. It happened suddenly then. Before I knew what was happening, his foot struck my crotch. Struck it hard. As I lay on the floor, writhing in pain, fighting off waves of nausea, the young man was fumbling with the lock on my door. "Why?" was all I could scream as he unlatched and ran out into the twilight. It was all so obvious now that I think about it. He wasn't really sent here to save me. No. He was working for that generic beast. He was its lapdog, its pet, sent here to taunt me, feed me false information, and probably worst of all, to give me hope. I crawled to the still open door and slammed it shut, straining upward to rearrange the locks. After a couple of minutes, the pain receded enough for me to stand. That leads up to where I am now. Since that demon tricked me by sending its lackey, I've been pacing around, typing this story on my phone. There's been a big commotion outside. I barricaded my door and windows using furniture. Strange creatures are swarming outside, not even bothering to shapeshift into generic forms anymore. I'll admit, for a time, I thought that I may have just made it all up. Maybe just ran with my delusions like the psychiatrist said. That moment of supposed clarity was shattered when I climbed up on my couch, barring the door, and peeked outside through the peephole. That's when I saw them. I can see their true forms. Dead, soulless eyes staring back at me, above mandibles with pincers protruding from their mouths. They bark my own language back at me, which means they've been here long enough to know our tongue. It's unnaturally loud when they speak, and they make their demands from the steps outside. I won't, though. I won't let them devour my soul. I know what to do. I still have the knife, and once I send this, I'll do it. Night falls outside, and there are many, many knocks on my door. Loud knocks. They've got some sort of device. They're wielding it and attempting to bash in the door. If you get a knock and look out the peephole, if the people are strange and look too generic, don't open your door.
So get this. I wake up running late for work again. My boss is gonna hate me since it's the third time this week. I was in a rush. Here I was waiting in the drive-thru at Dunkin'. Carol must not be working today. Whenever she works, the line always goes by fast. If she's not there, well, it's your own personal hell of getting upset over the line being bumper-to-bumper traffic with no end in sight, even though the window is right there. That's when I noticed the first license plate. The blue is what stuck out to me, that harsh distinction from the norm. Weird. We never really see out-of-state license plates in town. I didn't think much about it, on account of my boss was going to give me an earful if I didn't get this coffee in under 5 minutes. So I get to the window, and this girl is like handing me my coffee. She says thanks for choosing Dutch Bros. What? What is Dutch Bros? I just left. I didn't have time to deal with someone who's clearly drunk from the night before. As I hit more traffic, I noticed another Nevada plate. It's not the same car as before either. It's a cherry red convertible on the road in dead winter. It's not snowing or anything, but not weather for driving with the top down, to be certain. Then another. And another. There's no main plates on the road. I would think I was dreaming or something if the panic of me only having 1 minute and 45 seconds to get into work and clock in wasn't overtaking every function my thought had. I'm not ashamed. I admit I ran from the car to the office building, ran up the stairs, and kept clicking on my computer until it loaded. Clock in time, 6:59 and 57 seconds a.m. Suck it, Lucy. I swivel my chair to point out that I made it on time, but no one's there. I double take, then I triple take. I go inside Lucy's office. The light's off. It doesn't look like anyone's been here. I check my phone. It's a Thursday. Not a holiday either. Everyone should be here. Okay, this joke's lame, guys. I know I've been late, but you can come on out now. I say maybe only to myself, maybe to my coworkers, pulling some kind of I'm an adult, but I'm not gonna act like one high school prank. No one comes out. I call Lucy and my phone makes a god-awful static screech when I finally hear her voice. Look, if you're gonna be late, I don't want an excuse anymore. It's been 4 times this week already. 4. I'm at the desk. At my desk. With all due respect, I called because, you're not here, I say. I'm not a babysitter. I have a business to run. I can see your desk from my office. It's empty. Goodbye. Don't bother coming back so you can save us both the HR-filled firing chat. Then she hung up. I look around the office. It's the same office I've sat in Monday through Friday. It's my office. I look at the parking lot and only see my car. But then another car pulls in that I don't recognize. It has Nevada plates. That's not the only one that pulls in, and a few seconds later, another one joins it. Nevada plates again. Then another. I don't know what's going on. I don't like the feeling I'm getting either. For now, I'm in Lucy's office, and I've locked the door. It feels like the freaking Twilight Zone or The Walking Dead, and I'm not going to croak at 25 because I don't want to look stupid. What should I do?